Friday here on the North Shore Drive podcast, the Steelers have two new offensive coaches. We'll talk about Zach Azzanni and Tom Arth and what they bring to the table in the Steelers offense. That, the NFL awards with TJ Watt, did he get snubbed with Myles Garrett getting Defensive Player of the Year? And what the Steelers could learn from both the teams in the Super Bowls, all that here and more. On the North Shore Drive podcast, Chris Carter, Brian Batko, let's get into it.
You are now listening to the North Shore Drive Podcast, a show on all things Pittsburgh sports from the writers of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, hosted by Christopher Carter.
Hello and welcome to the North Shore Drive podcast from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Brian Batko, one of our great Steelers beat writers here at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Find all our written work at post-gazette.com. Find our podcasts on your favorite podcasting app and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily content from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, as well as our Monday, Wednesday, Friday episodes of the North Shore Drive podcast, which is sponsored by Mike's Beer Bar, the best bar in all of Pittsburgh. Go to Mike's Beer Bar today. There were 500 different available beers. 300 of those beers are local. 80 of those local beers available on tap at any point in time. And they got new ones switching in and out. More on that later. Brian, we've been wondering when the Steelers would make some moves on the coaching staff that would go the coaches behind Arthur Smith. And now we finally have some answers. They have added now at the wide receiver coach position, Zach Azzanni comes by way of the Jets, and before that, the Broncos, and Tom Arth as the quarterbacks coach, who was a pass game specialist for the Chargers the last two seasons with Justin Herbert. Though it seems that he's just the quarterbacks coach for the Steelers, and that the pass game coordinator is still something that could be added to if they really wanted to. What was your read on these two guys specifically being the additions here? Because they're not older coaches, but I think Arth is a little bit different because he's just been in the league for 2 years, but Azzanni is a guy who's been in the NFL for quite some time. And you look at it, the Bears in 2017, the Broncos from 2018 to 2022, and the Jets last year. What did these signings tell you?
Told me that the Steelers definitely valued experience and, guys who have sort of been around in the league to this point. Like you said, we'll get into Arth, but just starting with Azzanni, he's not a big name or anything like that. Not a notable former player, which you often see at those wide receivers coach positions. Frishman Jackson, who's out, played in the NFL. He had sort of that natural, respect quotient about him. But Azzanni, somebody who's just kind of worked his way up from the college ranks. And then, you mentioned the three NFL teams that he's coached with. Seems like he's well respected around the league. I think the biggest question for that specific unit within the Steelers is he going to be somebody that Diontae Johnson and George Pickens respect and take coaching from? Because I think despite being a former pro himself, I don't know that Frishman Jackson always had those two guys on the right page. We know about the issues with effort and intensity at times last season. So Azzanni has been around big-time wide receivers. He's been in receiving cores where there is kind of a blurred line between who's the one and who's the two. I was reading a little bit about his time in Denver where I think it was, Courtland Sutton was there and Emmanuel Sanders was there. Then Jerry Jeudy came in a little bit later too. So he's been in these kind of rooms. He seems like he's a good coach who knows what he's doing. That's good. I don't know that there's an obvious connection to Arthur Smith, but a lot of these guys, when they're at coaching conventions and meetings and just sort of being in the same orbit as each other for a long time, they get to know each other. They talk about each other. They know who they like and who they respect. So I imagine that's, part of the reason why he's here. Is kind of interesting to me that he's making a lateral move from the Jets to the Steelers. Makes you wonder, was he going to be out in New York? But he coached Garrett Wilson there. And last I checked, Garrett Wilson's pretty darn good. I guess you could argue he's, if you watched him at Ohio State, he didn't need a whole lot of fine tuning or technique coaching, but either way, he's somebody else who's on Azzanni's resume.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I noticed about Azzanni was he's worked with so many different kinds of wide receivers. Like he's worked with Courtland Sutton, who was a top pick, who went from being just maybe a guy people saying, "Oh, is he going to be a bust?" to being a Pro Bowler and then getting a big contract. He's also coached guys like Tim Patrick, who were an undrafted guy who eventually turned into a pretty good receiver for the Broncos for a couple years. So he's coached different level of guys. He's coached, like you said, Garrett Wilson. He has a wide array of different types of receivers that he's coaching.
Coached Antonio Brown in college. Granted, that was a long time ago now, but
07 to 09, him and Antonio Brown's time at Central Michigan perfectly aligned. I was going to say that. So he's seen everything as far as types of receivers he has to coach. And I think that that's the asset that he brings to the table with both dealing with Diontae Johnson, a veteran, and George Pickens, a younger veteran. And I wouldn't be shocked if the Steelers added a rookie, wide receiver in this draft class. So, and you also have Calvin Austin trying to find his way. So I think experience, like you said, was of prime importance. And the Steelers got a guy who, also, interestingly, when I was looking at it, this is a guy who survived 3 head coaches in Denver. When you look at his time, he got there when I think it was Vance Joseph was the head coach. He was hired by Vance Joseph. Joseph was fired. He was kept on through Vic Fangio. Vic Fangio was fired. He kept on through Nate Hackett, and then when Nate Hackett was fired, he went with Nate Hackett to the Jets. And I thought that was pretty interesting. Oftentimes when there's a whole upheaval of a staff, position coaches go too, and he did not. And I think maybe that says something about how much those guys believed him in his receiver room.
Well, it was those 2022 Broncos that I think Sean Payton called that like the worst coaching job of all time in the NFL by Nathaniel Hackett in his lone season as a head coach. So if you put any stock into that, Zach Azzanni was on that staff, but obviously that's it's not quite that simple or reductive. But either way, I mean, he's somebody who it's a nomadic job title, a position coach in the NFL for the most part, or college football for that matter. But you're right, he did have some staying power in Denver, and then last year with the Jets, maybe they felt the need to make some changes offensively, but that just kind of became a dumpster fire once Aaron Rodgers went down in week 1. So I was just watching some clips of Azzanni mic'd up over the years. Seems like your classic position coach, a very intense guy, but good rapport with the players too. And a little side note, there was a story on him in The Athletic a few years back, and he mentioned that one of his favorite wide receivers coaches around the league is the late Daryl Drake, who was with the Steelers, of course, his sudden and tragic passing in 2019. And that was Diontae Johnson's guy. I mean, he was so heartbroken when that happened. And, I'm sure that'll be some common ground for those two, given their love for Daryl Drake.
I'm right there with you. Let's talk real quick about Tom Arth, the quarterback's coach that they've hired. Not as much of a track record for him in the NFL. He was the head coach at Akron for 3 seasons, head coach at Chattanooga, came up at John Carroll. So smaller schools there in college football before the Chargers gave him a shot as their pass game specialist. And I thought that was an interesting move on the Chargers to go get that kind of a guy. But bringing him in brings him someone who's worked with Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert has put up, solid numbers the past few years. The last 2 years, the Chargers offense this year wasn't too good. They ranked 21st in points, but the year before that they ranked 13th in points, 9th in yards. They were able to move the ball, and I think everyone kind of recognizes Herbert's something there. They have a lot of other problems there, and they were also top 3 in passing that year. So looking at Arth, I think this is a different kind of a voice to add to the room there.
Well, he and Brandon Staley coached together way back in the day at John Carroll, so that was the Chargers connection for those two. Everything I hear and sort of know about Tom Arth is that he's a really sharp guy, probably did very well in the interview process here with the Steelers to fill this most important position, really, on any staff, but particularly their staff with a third-year quarterback who you're trying to get the most out of and see progress. And let's just be honest, if Kenny Pickett doesn't take it there, you're going to want Tom Arth to work with probably another young quarterback sooner than later. So that is a key role for a lot of NFL teams these days, is that quarterback's coach. It also kind of serves as a launching pad for a lot of the first steps to offensive coordinator, then potentially head coaches down the line. So, he's been around, like you said, more so in the college game, kind of was on the, beginning of this latest trend of coaches going from the college ranks to the pros. So he was the head man at a few different stops and dealt with all the, ups and downs that come with being the head coach of a program, recruiting, on-field stuff, off-field issues. Now he just gets a chance to focus on football, and I think you'll probably see the type of sharp offensive mind who spent some time behind Peyton Manning as a backup with the Colts. So that's probably what you're getting out of Arth, who it's going to be paramount for him to forge a good relationship with Kenny Pickett, and based on what I know about those two guys, I think they'll be able to do that quite seamlessly.
I think it'll be interesting to see what they're able to put together with these new guys on staff. When we come back, we're going to talk about the awards night that was. Cam Hayward finally getting the elusive Walter Payton Manning Award for Walter Payton Man of the Year Award. There we go. But also, of course, what everyone wants to talk about, TJ Watt and Myles Garrett getting the Defensive Player of the Year. We'll talk about that on the other side of the break here on the North Shore Drive podcast, Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. But first, I'll remind you this show is brought to you by Mike's Beer Bar, the best bar in all of Pittsburgh. Go to Mike's Beer Bar today. They have over 500 different available beers. 300 of those beers are from the local area. 80 of those local beers are available on tap. And when you go to Mike's Beer Bar, 80 of those local beers, when we're talking about the ones you can get on tap, they're rotating new ones in and out all the time. So you can always experience new bars, freshly poured from their taps, that are new beers from different breweries from across the Western Pennsylvania area. They do amazing things there, as well as have amazing food, like their steak on a stone meal. It's Mike's Beer Bar, the best bar in all of Pittsburgh. So go to Mike's Beer Bar, get your sports fix, and experience the best bar in Pittsburgh. When you get there, tell them Chris sent you.
Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.